So good morning and welcome to Kitty Talks. We share inspirational life stories that empower you to create yours. And today I have with me the beautiful Emily Williams. Welcome.
Thank you, Kitty. I'm excited to be here.
And for those listening, you know that every week I interview global thought leaders who share their stories so you can create the most amazing lives. And the reason I wanted to get Emily on the show is not only is she a 7-figure success coach, which is just phenomenal in itself, but the thing that I really love about Emily, and we've just talked about it now, is she very much follows her intuition. And she'll share with you her story, how she moved from Ohio to London on a whim, really. But Emily, welcome to Kitty Talks. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, I'm so thrilled to be here. I'm excited to dive into a lot of our favorite mutual topics.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I've already got kind of goosebumps, which is such a
good sign.
Great sign. Yeah. Would you mind sharing with our listeners, Emily, you know, who you are and what you do in the world at the moment? Maybe people who haven't heard of you.
Definitely. So I run a company called I Heart My Life, and I work with amazing female entrepreneurs who are super driven. They want to change the world, and they also want to create a life that's better than their dreams. So that means being able to travel and have the freedom, and also be able to create a lot of wealth for themselves and their family. And so I work with my husband in the business, and we run some amazing online programs together around mindset and business strategy and just really creating that dream life.
Fantastic. And you are an amazing example of someone who is doing that. You know, I met James first. And you guys are just doing some phenomenal things. Like, I know different conferences, traveling a lot, you know, I see you skiing, I see you doing so many wonderful things. And obviously you're serving so many people with your business.
Yeah, I think it's that combination. You know, of course, we all want to create a life that we love, but we also want to impact the world. And I think that's where we find the most fulfillment, is when we see our clients, you know, doing amazing things and transforming their life and going on to have their own clients and leaving their 9-to-5 jobs. It's really rewarding.
And I love that mindset. We're of totally the same mindset, you know, abundance. There is so much out there for everybody. And you hit the nail on the head. I think when we use our gifts and talents to serve others, that's when we really, you know, come alive. But can you take us back? Because obviously you do have a very famous story about how you got into this. Because I know at one stage you quite proudly say that you couldn't get a job at Starbucks.
Yes. So I feel like everyone has their I Heart My Life story, and we don't need to go back, you know, to the very beginning. But for me, my story really starts on this drive from Ohio to Chicago. And I had just graduated undergraduate school in college and got my psychology degree and graduated at the top of my class. And I thought I was going to go and get a master's in counseling psychology. And so I was literally driving to Chicago to go to this grad school and find an apartment in the city. And I got this feeling in the pit of my stomach, like it wasn't the right decision for me. And my mom was driving the car, and she looked over at me and saw these tears coming down, and I was trying to hide them under my sunglasses. But, you know, mother's intuition, she knew something was wrong. And so I basically just said, I don't think this is the right path for me. And so she took a deep breath, and we turned the car around and went back to Ohio. And this was after I made my parents travel to 12 different grad schools all around the US to see which one was right for me, because I had to feel into it. And so, you know, this kind of U-turn, metaphorically and literally, sent me into a quarter life crisis, because I no longer knew what I was meant to do. I didn't have like this clarity that I thought that I had previously. And so I moved back in with my parents, and it was then that I tried to get a job at Starbucks, because I didn't know what else to do. And I loved my pumpkin spice lattes. Thought that would fit, but they turned me down twice. And then finally I got a job on the third try. And I remember, I haven't really shared this publicly much, but I remember the morning my dad came through the drive-through to see me. And I was the one who opened up the store at 5 a.m. And he didn't even like coffee. He just came through to see me. And I just remember this feeling in the pit of my stomach again, like, this is not where I'm supposed to be. Like, what am I doing? I thought I was going to make my parents proud. And clearly this is, he was lovely, but it's not what he envisioned for his daughter.
And would you say because you kind of said you at that point suddenly didn't know what you were supposed to be doing, like, would you say before that you'd kind of followed the kind of atypical, we all get given it, go to school, get a good education, go and get a good college degree. And then you were kind of following the traditional path previously?
Well, it's funny because I grew up with entrepreneurs all around me. My dad was an entrepreneur, both my grandpas. And so I always knew I'd have my own business. But there was a point where I started to follow more of the typical route, like you're talking about, and playing it a little bit safe. Now, looking back, I know my psychology education obviously plays a part in what I do now. So I wasn't that far off. But for some reason, I lost touch with that dream of owning my own business. And I think at 18, it's hard to know how to actually do that. And so you do fall into the path of let's just go and get a degree and play it safe and then see what happens. And so I think that's pretty typical, but I definitely didn't want to have a typical life. I've always wanted something extraordinary.
Yeah. And I think, a lot of people, like I had the same thing when I was sort of younger. I was always knew I was here to do big things, but I didn't quite know what those big things were. So, So take us kind of to the next stage of the story. So you obviously Starbucks, you knew that wasn't what you were supposed to be doing. How did you end up moving to London?
So at that point, I realized, my heart totally got me into this mess. So I'm going to see if I can figure out what it's trying to tell me. And so I just got really quiet, like literally got quiet and tried to understand what it was that I did know, because there were so many things I was confused about, but I thought I should probably I know something. And the thing I kept hearing was like literally London, London, London. That just kept playing over and over in my mind. And I had visited the city a few years before when my friend was living here, and I stepped out of Victoria Station and just fell in love with it and felt like I was meant to live here. And so it really just comes back to the feeling of knowing I was being called to live in London. I didn't know anyone there. My friend didn't live there anymore, had no contacts. So I applied for a master's in nonfiction writing. That was the other thing I kind of knew. I'd always wanted to write a book. And so I got a student visa. I moved in 2010. Again, like I said, I didn't know anyone, didn't have any money. And just, I lived in a hostel for a week before I could find an apartment, and then found this tiny little studio flat the size of a closet, moved all my suitcases. I didn't have money for a taxi, so I carried all of my 4 ginormous suitcases across town back and forth and up all these flights of stairs. And it was just like, I was happy to be here, but, I was still so confused.
Talk about baptism of fire.
Yes.
Threw yourself into London. But what I love about what you said was that you got quiet and you got still, and that enabled you to actually hear that inner voice. And that's something that we really talked about with our listeners, is kind of creating that space so you can get clear, especially when you've got a lot going on.
And I think people, they hear it, they hear their intuition, they hear those whispers, yet they brush them aside, or they think, I'm just a girl from Ohio. I couldn't possibly move to another country, because no one in my family has ever really left Ohio, if I'm being honest. So I was the weird one. Yeah.
Wow.
And so, most people do just like push that aside and think like it's just crazy talk in their mind. But yeah, you have to really listen and then take action on behalf of what you're being called to do.
I think the other thing you said, which I really loved, was you listen to your heart. And I think something we could probably re-educate people in is getting them to think with their hearts. Definitely. Shifting it from the kind of up here to actually, okay, what do I really want to do with my life?
Yeah, I believe that all of our desires are dropped in, and there's plenty of things I don't want to do that I'm not being called to do, and I'm fine with that. But then for some reason, especially as women, we deny what we're being called to do and what we actually want. But if you think about your desires as being dropped in, that means they're literally meant for you and they're possible. So I think that's something that's a whole, we could do a whole episode on that alone.
Yeah.
That's a big one.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So you obviously came to London, baptism of fire, didn't really know anybody, lived in a hostel. How did it evolve? And I believe, and you're kind of showing me this, is that it's one step at a time. Our road, our path is not, it's not linear. You don't kind of get a vision of exactly where you're going. You kind of have to follow the breadcrumbs almost.
Oh yeah, exactly. That's exactly what happened. I didn't know, like I said, I didn't know anyone in the city. And so I ended up becoming like this serial online dater to try and meet people because I found it really difficult to make girlfriends. So I thought, well, I'm just going to try and meet the love of my life. No big deal. And ended up serial online dating. So about a year later, I met James, who's now my husband, online. And we had two weddings, one in London and one in Ohio.
Great.
And around that same time, a little bit after we got married, I discovered coaching. So my best friend just sent me Marie Forleo's website, and I was just in love with everything I saw, because up until that point I thought coaching was just kind of like for men in suits, carrying a little 3-ring binder, going from office to office. I didn't know that it could be like Marie TV, and really fashionable and loving her life, and everything that she's an example of. And so that for me was that second moment my whole life changed course. The first was driving to Chicago, and then the second is when I discovered coaching. And so I started to realize that I could really help other women who were experiencing what I experienced in terms of the quarter life crisis and being confused. And I remember when I first moved to London, there were days where I would just literally cry because I had no clue what I was doing. Yeah. But I started to realize that if I focused on what was positive and what I did want, then things would transform. And so I knew a little bit about how to get myself out of that quarter life crisis. So I figured I could help other women do the same.
Fantastic. And you said was it like a light bulb going on in your head? It was just like, oh my God, that's what I need to do. And yes. Coaching is, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And I came up with the idea for I Heart My Life because I wanted to help other women love themselves and their life. And that was September 2013. And really, everything has taken off since then.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think, for people listening, it is the breadcrumbs, that your passions, the thing you're passionate about will lead you to kind of the right path, and it is to have the courage to go towards those. And then the next kind of step of the process will be revealed, essentially.
Yeah. And I think with Marie, I've shared this. She's actually seen that I've shared this. I was really jealous of her. And I think a lot of people, they think jealousy is a bad thing, but you can use that to help you get clarity. Like if you see someone traveling the world and you're feeling really jealous, or you see someone, setting up their website or speaking on stage or launching their book, you can use that to give you an indication of what you want. If it evokes jealousy, then that means something, and paying attention to that emotion can give you so much clarity.
I think that's a really, really valid point because like you said, you might look at someone and go, oh, I want their life. But actually that's where you need to concentrate and look at, and what is it about their life that you want, and how can you then embed that and implement that into your life?
Exactly.
So I know you took your business from something like $427 in the first month to then a 6-figure business in 6 months, which is incredible.
Yeah, my first sales came in July 2014. I made $442, and then scaled up to 6 figures in 6 months. And then in my first 18 months, I hit 7 figures.
What do you kind of put that down to? Like, you and I've only actually met once, but I can feel the incredible energy that comes from you. You strike me as a very driven, very passionate woman. Like, what do you put that down to, that rapid success?
I love this question. So for me, it's multiple things, and it really kind of encompasses the work that I do with my clients as well. So there's absolutely no way that I could be where I am today and have experienced those results without a lot of hard work. And I think that that's a really boring answer, but that's the reality. And I'll get to the rest of the answer in a second. But I think a lot of people get into business and they think, much like I did, that your website's going to be up, the floodgates are going to open, people are going to find you, there aren't going to be any hardships. It's just going to be so easy. And, I didn't think that it was going to be like all, fun and games, but I didn't realize how hard I was going to have to work. And in the beginning of my business, I was working between 80 and 100 hours a week.
Wow.
There were many times where, I wasn't going to parties and I wasn't doing much else besides hanging out with James and building my business. And I'm sharing this because a lot of people want the success that I've had, but a lot of people aren't willing to put in the time. And that's fine. Like, you have to know your own path, and you have to know what feels good to you and what your journey looks like, and, how fast or whatever you take this. But I share that just to like be real about what it took for me to do that.
Yeah, and it's a really valid point, because I think we look at maybe women who are doing, someone like Marie, like you said, who is doing fantastically well, but she's been doing this for a hell of a long time. And like, right. I think, like you said, it takes a lot of hard work and effort, and it's almost incremental, and suddenly you'll start to see the results, but it doesn't come overnight. And I think this whole overnight success thing is a complete fallacy, really.
Yeah. And I mean, there was a period of time where I had 54 people say no to me in a row. Well, 53 no's, and then the 54th finally said yes. And so it's about persistence. And when you're really in touch with what you're meant for, then you can keep going. If you're just doing this for the money or for some external reason, you're not going to keep going, because you're not going to have that motivation. But I knew I was meant for something big, and that I could help people. And so that really helped me continue, even when it did feel like things weren't happening.
And I think that's an incredibly valid point, because when you're serving a higher purpose, when you're driven by something bigger than yourself, like you said, money, success, etc., you're actually, you're here to make a difference and have a positive impact on people. Then that enables you to keep going when the no's keep coming.
Yes. And I really transformed my mindset. And so a lot of people also think, I'm just going to step into this life of an entrepreneur, but being an entrepreneur is really a lifestyle, and it's a mindset shift that you have to make. And most people take their 7-year-old self mindset, especially around money and success, and bring that into their adult life. And it doesn't work. And so for me, I had to really train myself to think in a new way. And that came down to the transformational work I did with coaches and reading books and really working on myself internally. Because I also realized, as a coach, how could I help people when I myself wasn't strong enough and wasn't thinking in the right way and in the way that a successful entrepreneur would think. And so it was a lot of internal work paired with that hard work.
Yeah. And I think, it's a life, for me anyway, I consider it to be a lifelong learning journey.
Oh, definitely.
You don't just pick up a few books and, suddenly it changes. You've got to be fully committed to a journey of lifelong transformation, really.
Exactly. Yeah.
And talk to me about intuition, because obviously we're really big on intuition on Kitty Talks. I've interviewed 80 thought leaders now, Emily, and
wow.
I would say the common theme, though, is when I've interviewed them, is that these people are rarely, they've stepped outside of what society considers to be the normal path, and they've really listened to their intuition, and they've followed their gut, what I believe they followed their soul, and actually that's why they're having such incredible results. So just would love to hear your kind of
completely. And I have a show and a podcast as well. And I find the same thing, whenever I ask anyone what has contributed to their success, it's never like I built this funnel or, I hired this person. It's really following their gut. And I see that in myself as well. And so, literally everything I've done, moving to London, starting the coaching business, continuing to move forward, even when 54 people said no to me, it's all a matter of my heart, just knowing that I'm meant for something. And so, even as simple as creating the next big program or feeling called to host an event or whatever it may be, everything for me is heart driven. And I think when you start, like you said, following those breadcrumbs, when you start to follow them, even with something small, like cross the room and sit in this chair, which I literally just did. I made James cross an entire room, climb over all these people at this event. I sat down next to this girl and she turned to me and she said, "Are you Emily Williams?" And I said, "Yes." And we started chatting and she ended up becoming a client, literally signed up for my group program, for my one-on-one program. And that was all based on intuition about where I should sit.
Brilliant.
Yeah. And so when you start to follow those little nudges, you'll see how powerful your intuition actually is. And it'll give you even more confidence to make big leaps and decisions based on intuition because you've seen the power of it along the journey.
And do you for example, with myself, initially I used to hear my intuition when I was walking the dog. And then later I've kind of developed a meditation practice and things. What type of things help you tune in?
Mine's really strong now, but one of the simple ways I think you can do it is by asking yourself yes or no. And so James and I even practice this with restaurants, which sounds really silly, but it's a good example. Like he'll ask me, "Do you want Italian or Thai?" And for a while I'd be like, "Oh, I don't know, you pick." But then I said, "You know what? No, I do know. So I want Italian, then I can hear it. Yes. Do I want Thai? No." And so when you think to yourself, do I want to do this interview? If it's an immediate yes, then awesome, do it. If it's a no, then don't do it. If I do I want to take this course? Yes. And most people, they stop themselves even though they hear the yes. They think that that's not, they can't trust it, but it's there if you literally just pay attention and you don't give your mind time to take over. You just listen to those gut reactions.
Absolutely. It's like a muscle that you've got to train, isn't it? Because I think, like you said, we're not taught to follow it. It's something that we're taught to almost dismiss. And so literally, you kind of have to I had the same thing yesterday. I had a meeting and I kept on getting this urge. I needed to, the woman next to me hadn't spoken. And of course, she was not confident enough to speak in this meeting. And when she did speak, she came out with something incredible. So I sort of turned to her and said, "I know you need to speak. I know that sounds really weird, but can you speak?" And she was like, "Yes, okay." And she had this incredible point. But
I love that.
Like you said, it is a constant muscle that you have to work because it's something that we have to have confidence. Like I'm sure your husband loved you when you made him move across the whole of the seating.
Yeah, he was carrying my big bag at the time too. So poor thing. But yeah, and I mean, even for me, it often happens in spinning class or when I'm doing some sort of movement. Like I know when I started my I Heart My Life show, I didn't want to do it. I didn't think I had the time to do it. And then I was in spinning class one day and it was like this big moment where I was just riding on the bike. There was this really amazing John Legend song that came on. And I just got this feeling like, you know what, Emily, you have to do this. And I saw a glimpse like into the future of what this would mean for the impact I want to have on the world and for the brand. And so it was like I was being called to say yes.
And for people listening, what Emily described there, you know, she was in an expansive state because she was doing something like spinning. You know, that was something that was expanding her energy, which enabled her to kind of get the right message. So if you're listening to that and you're thinking, how can I increase my intuition? You know, what I would suggest is things like exercise. It could be spinning, it could be yoga, it could be walking, because we're more in an expansive state, which enables us to hear those drop in, like Emily was talking about, the things drop in that we're supposed to be doing. And those are kind of, I always call them kind of messages from the divine or from our soul.
I love that. And do you also find that when you're talking to people who share your belief in intuition, that also helps you hear it and like makes you more confident to follow it?
Oh, absolutely. And so the other thing I get, Emily, which I'm sure you've got something too, is I get this incredible, I think because my mind is reasonably busy, I think the way I get confirmation is just energy rushing through my body.
Yes.
Like at the moment, I've got like goosebumps, like just everywhere. Like whenever we speak, well, I've learned that it's the truth. It's almost like whenever I'm saying something that is the truth, it's almost like my guides or.
Yeah. One of my coaches calls them God bumps.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, you know, I find that the more of this work that you do, the more we trust our intuition, the more we kind of get stronger in our sense of self, the more the kind of signs come. And it's just something that you literally need to kind of work on a daily basis, really.
Yes. Great.
Yes. Oh, well, yeah, we've obviously both come from the same kind of school of thought.
Yeah, I was even listening to one of the Marie TV episodes recently with the creator of Poo-Pourri, which is a $300 million company now. And she was talking about how she listened to her intuition. They were at about 4 million. And she's like, you know what? I'm being called to push this forward, to move this forward. We have to do something. So they created this amazing ad, which is very famous now, and ended up with like, I forget the exact amount, something like $4 or $8 million in back orders because they weren't prepared for the amount that would come in. Wow. And, you know, now the company has exploded, but that was literally all based on intuition. And she said that there are times now, even on their team, where they will, you know, have a project going or be planning for something for like a year. And then they'll all realize, you know what, this doesn't feel good anymore. And they just scrap the whole thing. Wow. So I think like, I don't know that I'm at that level yet, but that's so inspirational to just know like what you can do just by trusting your intuition.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I, without getting too heavy about it, I really think it's our soul path, that
Yeah.
it's actually our soul communicating with us. And, I truly believe that each of us have got a gift we can bring to the world. So everybody listening, you have got a way of contributing to help making this planet a better place. And the way to start doing that is just, as we described, to start tuning into your intuition and following those nudges.
Yes.
So, what is next for I Heart My Life and for you? What's kind of on the horizon with your husband?
What isn't? I don't know how you
great.
feel, but yeah, I mean, as an entrepreneur, James and I were like, can we ever predict anything? Like, I don't know. We thought we had the whole year mapped out and knew what was happening, and things change so quickly in a really good way, but it's such a ride. And so for us, I mean, I just got a book deal with Hay House. So that's really exciting.
Congratulations.
Yeah. So obviously I moved to London to write this book, and it was very serendipitous when I got invited to the meeting. I passed that first studio flat that I lived in when I first moved to London, and so feel like I've come full circle in a bit of a way with that. So that's coming up. We're hosting our first public event at some point next year, I Heart My Life Live, which is going to be incredible. Lots of things happening with our programs, with our amazing clients. And I mean, even personally, we're just really excited to be working together. But James has his own path and his own company that he wants to really develop over the next few years as well.
And one of the other things that I admire about you guys is your total authenticity and your total honesty. Because my husband doesn't necessarily know this yet, but at some stage I'd love him to come and work in what we're doing. And obviously I know that that's going to bring interesting challenges because we both like to have the control.
Yes.
And I know you guys have been really open and authentic about kind of the way your relationships had to evolve to kind of work together.
Yeah, definitely. Last year, we spent about 10 months working with a relationship coach who specializes in entrepreneurial couples. And because we never planned on working together, when he met me on that online site, I was working as a nanny and a VA. And, he knew I wanted to own my own business at some point, but entrepreneurship was never part of his path. He didn't grow up with entrepreneurs around him. He was working in TV for 12 years. And so for us to work together, it was never part of the plan. And I didn't know how to be an entrepreneur. I didn't know how to work with my husband and essentially be his boss, which is a really weird dynamic. And so we had to get some support in that area because it definitely hasn't been easy. And I'm very much, the way he describes it is like I'm running up a mountain and he's chasing me. And then he finally gets to the top and realizes I'm on the next mountain. So, I'm not always fun to work with or be married to. And so we've had to adjust, and figure out what our natural styles are and what we really want. But the cool thing is we realize that we're literally always in alignment with what the next step actually is and what we want, even if we haven't voiced it yet. It's really interesting to see how we are on the same path, regardless, and moving towards the same thing.
And how do you do you build a vision for your life? Do you kind of say, okay, over the course of the next 1 year, I want to do this, 3 years, I want to do this. I can see from you that you've got a really clear vision of what you want to happen. And I personally have the same for my life. And I really believe that that's how we help create it. But I'd love to know a little bit more about how you go about that.
I'd love to be able to describe this perfectly. I'm going to try, but a lot of it is intuition. So I listen to what I'm excited about, what I'm feeling called to do. And then my timeline, I always say, I really like to compress my timeline. Things happen really fast for me. For a lot of people, they have a 10-year vision and they want to, host the dream events in 5 years or whatever it is. But I'm like, why would I wait? Let's just do it next year. And so I actually need someone like James to say, okay, well, let's really take a look at what it will take to make that happen. And is that in alignment with what we want to do? And is that something that feels good when you look at the whole picture? And most of the time, my intuition is spot on, but sometimes I need to move things back, maybe a year or something, just to account for a lot of the amazing things that happen organically. Like this book, I've always wanted to write it, but they approached me. And so I didn't think that it would happen this quickly. And so I think there are things that we have planned out, but then there's other stuff that happens that we definitely were not expecting. And so I personally like the combination. I want to have the vision, but I don't always know the how. And I think that's okay. And I think that makes things even more exciting.
And then when an opportunity comes to you, it sounds to me like you kind of feel into it to see whether it's something that works.
Exactly. Yeah. And I definitely feel into it and see if it excites me, especially with the I Heart My Life show. I realized that did actually excite me. And there was probably a little bit of fear that was stopping me from moving forward right away. And I've learned, I think that's really another thing that I've learned that maybe you'll resonate with, I'm sure you will, is that fear isn't a bad thing. It's always going to be there. And so I've learned how to tell whether it's like a fear, stay away, don't do it. Or if it's just a fear, like this is a really big opportunity. And of course you're going to be scared because it's going to really stretch you, but it's still a yes.
And I think that's a really valid point for people listening, because I've had people say to me, oh, what, you get nervous? Or you're like, when I still get nervous when I'm doing interviews, and that, like you said, I think we're normal human beings. It just means that we're prepared to kind of keep pushing ourselves, to keep opening our sort of sphere of possibility.
Definitely. I mean, even for me, when I did my first video series and even video now, it's not my natural thing.
No, me neither.
I get really freaked out about it. I'd much rather just do an audio. I'm very much an introvert, but I know what will happen when I put my message out there and I realize it's not about me. And so I kind of like force myself to do
it. Yeah, I would say exactly the same thing. In the end, you kind of get to the stage where you're like, right, well, just got to do it. Got no choice.
Yeah, exactly. How do you tend to plan out for, say, the next 5 years, or do you plan?
I would say my husband and I look at the year and then the 3 years. And then I was just yesterday kind of building a vision for the next 3 years, because I know you want to have a family, and that's definitely on my agenda as well. So I'm trying to plan out how that looks, really, and in my head. And it's interesting at the moment because I feel like I'm being slowed down. I can feel with things that are happening in my life, I'm being slowed down, because I think otherwise, babies need space. So I've been designing the space for the business and having evergreen things.
Right.
So, yeah, like yourself. So
I love that. Yeah, my mom called me the other day and she's like, I think you should freeze your eggs. And so I know, the time is of the essence, but I'm not quite there yet. And I have so much I want to do in the next few years, but it's definitely on our radar.
Yeah. And I'm afraid I'm of the school of thought. That's a belief. Like I'm older than you. I'm 40 at the moment. And I don't buy into that shit. Excuse my French. I'm not buying into that. I'm communicating with my souls of my children. They're there, they're close. I've got their names. So I think that's another thing I'll try and do, is just have space when I'm walking to communicate with them, and I'm literally calling them in.
I love that. How many do you want to have?
Well, apparently 2, but the question is how close. They're coming close together, but I don't know if they're going to come together.
Oh, wow.
But there is twins in our family, and part of me is like, oh, we'll just get into it for get it done.
I really want twins. I love that.
Yes. Well, maybe we can have twins around the same time. Then we can help each other. That's another baptism of fire.
Yes, totally.
Oh, Emily, I really want to thank you for coming on, because I know, Emily's story, for people listening, she's a fantastic example of what we're talking about here on Kitty Talks. She's got an amazing vision for her life. She really has tuned into her soul. She's listening to her intuition, and she's just totally honest about that path. So I really want to thank you, Emily. I know we met, didn't we, before Christmas, and then things were a bit bonkers, but I really want to thank you for making time to speak to us, because I know your story will really help our listeners.
Oh, it's my honor. Thank you for having me on. I'm so excited to hear what people think and the path that they follow by listening to their intuition.
Yes, and please do write in, if you've got something from this interview, please share it with us. I'm going to have all Emily's details in the show notes, so you'll be able to connect with her as well. But yeah, please do share this interview and like it. And we will see you again with another thought leader next week on Kitty Talks. Bye-bye. This podcast was sponsored by my Do Your Dharma course. Create a life so good that you pinch yourself. This 8-week online course demystifies Dharma and shows you how to tune in to why you're really here. Go to www.kittytalks.com/do your Dharma.